Hey all, Mac here. This is my video guide for the Lightning Spirit Amazon that I've been playing in PoE 2 Dawn of the Hunt. This build uses a lot of move speed and high damage scaling, as well as clear scaling, to just absolutely decimate maps in 3 to 4 minutes, depending on how many mechanics you have in them. But for the most part, this build is just super fast. And my version of it is going to be a little bit different. I'm scaling more move speed, and I'm running Trinity. And I'll explain how to scale the build even further than I have, because I don't have it completely min-maxed, and I don't really plan to. I will be going to Steep Hawk. But nonetheless, let's get into the guide. So, what is it exactly that I'm doing differently than other Lightning Spirit Amazons? Well, a couple of things. First off, I'm running a more defensive setup, and I'm also not running Roa, which I believe is a very annoying playstyle, especially getting into more juice maps, like daily juice maps where you're just constantly getting knocked off of your Roa. And as such, I believe this setup is a lot better in terms of just farming those juice maps, and the damage can actually scale quite well, and I'll explain how with the gearing process as well as the skills process. But first and foremost, I'm running Trinity. It's a tri-ally setup. Therefore, we're scaling fire, cold, and lightning damage. This is really nice for things like Expedition, where you would literally have to blow up 3 remnants with all elements immunity in order to mess that up. Furthermore, you also do more damage to things like lightning-resistant mobs, which you would otherwise struggle with. But the downside of this, obviously, is that you do have to sort of curb your damage together with Trinity. You have to get their roll ranges together, which is made a little bit easier by Painter Servant, and I'll go over that later. My defensive layer is going to be mainly Evasion ES, and that's why we're taking Ghost Shrouds and Wind Dancer, or Ghost Dance. And this is just going to have us restore ES whenever we get hit. Since we have such high evasion, we're restoring most of our ES every time we get hit. Finally, we're pairing this with something called Fury's Ire, which is an insanely strong unique. It basically gives us acrobatics without any downside, meaning we can evade all hits. This includes big boss slams and all of that. You probably saw in the video that I tanked a couple things from bossing that I probably shouldn't have been able to, and that's because of having acrobatics. We're also playing Olroth Resolve. This is the kind of min-maxy part of it, and you can play Eternal Youth and a normal Life Blast instead, which is better uptime for ES evasion build. But Olroths just give us the extra layer of protection should we take a hit that takes us down to fairly low HP and past our ES. But again, I'll get into that through the gearing. Okay, so I think it's important to start off with the actual skills and what exactly it is we're doing to scale damage, as well as our clear. That's going to explain basically how we're min-maxing some parts of this build, specifically the clear speed. So what I'm running right now is we're scaling a fused weapon on our Amazon. We're taking Rising Tempest, Arbiter, Concentrated Effect, Blind, and Long Shot. I'm taking Combat Frenzy. This is our main means of generating frenzy charges during mapping. And we're taking Perfusion and Herbalism. This Herbalism is only here because I have Olroths. I wouldn't take this, and I would instead take Cannibalism if you're not running Olroths. Combat Frenzy, we need to electrocute, freeze, or pin enemies. And since we're constantly freezing and electrocuting with Herald of Thunder, which I'll explain in a second, we're constantly generating these frenzy charges and infusing our weapon. Trinity is we're just adding mastery, so we get +3 on it. But it basically gives us 13% more elemental damage with attacks per 50 resonance of any type. So resonance is built by doing damage with similar rolls in a given range. And when we get max stacks of Trinity, that's going to be, you can have 100 of each element. Meaning we can get 300 stacks of Trinity. And if we have all 3 elements, that's quite a lot of Trinity, which is, it's an insane amount of damage if you can get all 3. The downside is you have to balance, which again, Painter Servant. This converts all of our damage to equal amounts of each element. For a single target, we're playing Stormlance with Deliberation, Primal Armament, Blindside, Scattershot, and Martial Tempo. It's really important to play Scattershot because having 2 extra spears thrown at once is actually a lot of extra damage, as they all detonate and they all shotgun onto bosses. We played Deliberation and Primal Armament just for the more damage scaling. We're pretty much standing still when we're throwing these out anyways, especially with this tanky setup. And Blindside is really good when we start blinding enemies with Heralds. Martial Tempo is thrown in there. I think it's really important if you're not scaling attack speed, and I'll get into why we don't want to scale that much attack speed a little bit later in the gearing section. The big and most important skill, if you're just going to play mapping, you probably don't even need Stormlance, but I would recommend it just for some tanky rares. But Lightning Spear needs Bolt. This is the first and foremost skill you need. I said this was going to be OP at the very start of the league, just testing it out, and it turns out to be true. We're playing Fork with it because that also is insane amounts of clear. Bullseye for more accuracy, just so we can get crit capped. Mobility, this is one that you can swap out if you play Roa, but I do highly recommend you try Move Speed instead of Roa and play Mobility. This just makes it to where we actually don't get as big of a penalty to our Bolt Charge when using Lightning Spear and moving around. Perpetual Charge finally just makes it so we don't consume any charges on occasion, which helps our Frenzy Charge uptime. For Herald of Thunder, this is going to help us clearing through maps a lot. So we have Magnified Effect and Reach. Reach was recently added, and these two are pretty insane because Reach, while it takes accuracy, it doesn't actually do anything for the true accuracy of Herald of Thunder. As Herald of Thunder, you can tell, is it for some reason it doesn't count as having attack accuracy, and it's just a 100% hit chance no matter what. This also means that the crit isn't really scaled by Amazon, which means we just get 35% more AoE and 30% more AoE, 65% total by taking these two gems. Another really important two that you need is Electrocute and Neural Overload. This is if you're not running Kitokos, which I am not because I'm playing Trinity. What this does, so priming for Electrocute just gives 40% electrocution, and if you play Electrocute, you will just basically instantly electrocute all the mobs, thus generating frenzy charges through Combat Frenzy and giving us infusion charges, which increases our damage by quite a lot. Finally, Innervate on this, just to give it a little bit of extra damage and thus clear capability. For my last auras, I'm running Wind Dancer with Pin. This is kind of useless. Maim is also kind of useless. Unbreakable is really nice. I don't actually know this is gonna work, but I'm assuming it does, so it's here, and it doesn't really increase the amount we reserve, so yeah. Cast on Crit. This is very important in order to play a one-button single target setup. Now, you can drop Cast on Crit because it is 100 Spirit, and you can play Sniper's Mark instead, but then you have a 4-button rotation for your single target, which is Barrage, Stormlance, Sniper's Mark, and Explosive Spear, and that is not very fun to play in my opinion, especially against very mobile enemies or very mobile bosses. So Cast on Crit, Sniper's Mark will basically allow you to detonate your Stormlances instantly when they hit, assuming they hit a marked target. Ghost, this also helps with Frenzy Charge uptime, by the way. Ghost Dance finally is really nice because that's how we regen our ES when we get hit. And I'm just running Precision, Clarity, and Fast Forward. Fast Forward is free to socket in this. You really want this because it just delays, or it reduces the duration between gaining Ghost Strats. I mean, we'll just get these faster. Really free, just please take it. You can drop Precision or Clarity depending on how much Spirit you are missing. But I am a big advocate for taking at least Precision. Clarity is kind of only there for a single target, as you shouldn't be running out of mana with this setup playing Lightning Spear. Alright, so let's move into the gear. And I think this is where a lot of debate is going to pop up. I think some people may or may not agree with some of the takes, but this is my take on what gearing this setup should be like. First and foremost, your weapon is king with any attack build, and here it's true as well. Tingle Tongue is a pretty solid option for clearing. If you just plan on mapping, that could be very well good enough. I don't know if it's enough flat damage, to be honest, though. So I do believe finding a better spear is always priority. Now, that being said, I got this spear for around, I want to say it was like 50 div or something. I think the price has now ballooned up to, I wouldn't even know. We say like 470 PDPS and 400 accuracy. With this amount of base crit is also around 60, but there's only 3 listed. it's very unlikely that you find it, but you really want good base crit chance, because that's part of what we're going to be scaling. You want high base accuracy, so you get the flat added damage from Penetrate on the Amazon tree. And you're going to want just flat fizz damage. Every other stat is secondary. I ended up having to whittling this in order to fix it, as it originally had attack speed. Now, with your weapon, I think attack speed is completely bait. You don't want to get attack speed when you're playing Volt, because if you're wanting to attack fast, you're just going to be sending out non-chaining lightning spears, which is completely pointless when you're trying to play Volt. When you play Volt, you get +3 chain and +15 added damage for free when you move around and don't hit every so often. So like letting the charges actually build up before you attack and in between attacks is a lot more important and a lot higher priority. Thus, you don't need attack speed on your weapon. Please, like, get base crit over that. The gain mana per enemy kill is actually really nice of a stat. It helps with mapping. I don't ever have to really worry about mana, honestly, ever with my setup, but in mapping, if you have that stat, you don't need to worry about it. Increased stun duration is unironically kind of good. At least on map bosses, the stun duration is really noticeable. I can basically one phase, as you saw in the Savannah map. But let's get into the other weapon. So, since they added sockets into sectors, do keep in mind you can't socket Flat Spirit at Kappa. You have to go get one of the talismans that provide Spirit. I forget which one, but the talisman gives you 10% increased Spirit from the flat value. Those are extremely expensive. That being said, a 200 Spirit Scepter is also extremely expensive. I need this exact scepter in order to get all the Spirit for my support, and I really wanted to run Clarity Precision at the time. I bought this, so this is what I ended up with. But either way, you want to run a Omen Scepter specifically, because it gives you Malice. Malice allows you to inflict critical weakness on nearby enemies, and critical weakness basically just gives you increased crit hit chance against them. That scales up to 4%. 4% flat crit hit chance is massive. However, if you have enough accuracy, you don't really need an Omen Scepter, so any Scepter will do. But I do highly recommend playing Omen Scepter. For our amulet, we are going to be playing Beacon of Azus. This has since, I believe, gone down in a price. It is not as crazy. It's still looking in like the close to 1 div range, but there's mainly the Spirit on it we need. But the biggest thing on this, of course, is critical hits ignore monster elemental resistances. Just a very strong mod, since we're almost always critting with Lightning Spear. If we take a look at our Lightning Spear crit, the additive crit chance to this is going to be 78 to 100% with a flat rate of 24%. So, next unique that we really want. You can play a high evasion, so around 2500 evasion body armor instead, but I tested that and I believe that Hiri's Ire is just most definitely worth it. Again, this just gives you acrobatics for free, so you can dodge all hits, not just attacks, with Hiri's Ire equipped. And that's on the condition that you haven't been hit recently. So you can technically get chain stun constantly, or just get hit by a bunch of small hits, and that stops it from working. But at the same time, you won't usually get one shot all that often with Hiri's Ire, because you have to get hit first in order to even have a remote chance of getting hit by a spell. We're running Painter Servant, obviously. Just converts everything to splits your damage into the 3 elements. Really important to have. Builds unplayable without it, because you need this in order to proc Trinity. In terms of the helmet, we just want a very high ES helmet with resistances. You're going to be needing to cap your resistances on rings, belts, boots, and helmet. In terms of the boots, you can kind of run Life here. You can run ES Evasion. That's what I chose to do. But 35% move speed is really important here. I would drop some damage on rings just to get the move speed, because move speed is insanely valuable on this build. And I'll get into the tree and you'll see just how much I'm scaling. In terms of the belt, this is where you can maybe sneak in some Chaos Res. I managed to. It's expensive, but it's definitely worth it. This build doesn't rock a lot of Chaos Res. Usually you don't have to worry about it because you have, spell dodge. But on occasion, especially in Simulacrum, if they have gain as extra Chaos, if you get hit by a bunch of small hits, that really builds up fast. In terms of the rings, you want accuracy and flat damage as well as life on the prefixes and reses on the suffixes. I would go for obviously capping reses before the damage, but accuracy here is really helpful to cap our crit chance. Finally, we're running Olroth's Flask. This just gives us guard whenever we overheal. And so, let's say we take a hit, it chunks our health to like 70%. We'll pop Olroth's once. We'll not only heal the full HP, we'll also gain guard. And what this guard does is it's a flat shield that eats damage before damage is taken from your health and your ES. And what this allows is for your ES to recharge, because it's not being directly damaged, and as long as you're taking damage from your guard, your ES can recharge. This is insanely powerful for a hybrid build. The Mana Flask, run whatever, doesn't matter. In terms of charms, I think Death and Hope is actually unironically pretty strong. It just gives you Vault Discipline from PoE 1 whenever you get frozen. Pretty solid, also really good charge up time. Forsaken Bangle, I think, is a really underrated item. This basically just gives you life and mana recoup based on 50% of chaos damage prevented. By prevented, it means the amount of damage prevented by your resistances and mitigations. And as such, you'll just be constantly recouping if you take a bunch of small chaos hits. Meanwhile, your third charm, this is where I'm going to say, if you can afford it, Rite of Passage is obviously the best choice here. It just gives you a lot of speed. But otherwise, you can run either a Stun Charm or a Gold Charm here as your last option. Perhaps swap it out for like Ignite for bosses or whatever else. Okay, let's get into the tree. So my pathing for this looks a little wonky. That's because I'm also looking for some jewel nodes, and I don't really want to anoint Subterfuge Mask or Special Ward because there just really isn't that many points I can pad to that are worth anointing those over just like a really high damage one. Overwhelming Strikes is an insanely high damage node. I would highly recommend you take that. Elemental Infusion, we're playing Predatory Instinct for extra damage, Critical Strike, and Penetrate. This is all damage nodes. This node allows us to basically gain crit chance from overcapped accuracy, which is entirely why we're scaling so much accuracy everywhere. And then Penetrate is the reason why we also want accuracy on our main hand weapon. This is just like extra damage. Just don't even think about it. Don't try to play around it. Literally just know that about 45% of the boss's health is going to give you 50% more damage. And then finally, Elemental Infusion, you just consume charges to gain extra damage. That's, again, scaled through our Combat Frenzy. So, some of the key nodes that you'll see right away is that I'm taking a lot of move speed nodes, right? We have one here, we have one here. I'm padding over to this as well. And this, like, there's a lot of move speed nodes. On top of that, all my jewels have 2% move speed on them because this build is looking to scale movement speed. And the reason why we want to get, well, 57% is, again, to build up those volt charges faster. That's the entire point of this build. And because the maps are so dang massive, you really want a lot of move speed to be able to get from point A to point B fast. This also helps with mechanics like breaches, where you're constantly having to move back and forth. And it kind of negates the necessity for things like Blink, which in and of itself is a power loss due to the spirit requirement. We want to be pathing towards Bestial Skin, because this just doubles our evasion from our body armor. And even with something a little bit lower, like a Curie Ire, it's still worth taking. Especially in combination with Spectral Ward. This is why we're running a hybrid build, right? Is Spectral Ward and Subterfuge Mask combined gives us a solid amount of EF. And the biggest issue with evasion builds have always been that their HP pool is too low. And as such, in order to fix that, we run ES as well. Beyond that, it's really just a bunch of crit nodes and damage nodes. The spear nodes down here are pretty good, some accuracy nodes. Honestly, this is pretty good. Harness the Elements is really strong with Trinity setup, and so for the last 4 levels, that's probably what I would spec into. Or the last 3 levels, sorry. There's an extra point of crit damage here that I have, but yeah. You can spec 4 points into this if you don't want to take the flask effect, but do keep in mind then you'd also be missing out on 4% move speed, which I wouldn't do. Shimmering is also really strong. You get move speed while you have energy shield. This is just, again, more move speed. I don't know if the point is clear yet. We're running as much move speed without Roa and without Tailwind as possible. So then there is an option. You can run a helmet that gives. There's a helmet. I believe it's the Corsair helmet. Let's see if I can't find it. Yeah, so it's a black insignia. This gives Tailwind on critical hit, and we lose all Tailwind when hit. It's basically an ascendancy on a helmet. Tailwind is extremely powerful because it just gives you move speed and skill speed. We see 1% increased move speed, 3% increased skill speed, and 15% increased evasion per stack for 10 seconds with a maximum of 10 stacks. 10% move speed is nothing to laugh at. It's a good helmet. It kind of eliminates your ability to run this Subterfuge Mask and Evasion ES setup, so do keep that in mind. You will be much squishier in that state. Alright guys, that about wraps it up. So I do highly recommend that people who, enjoy things like Jabzon from Z2 and just really, really want to play something that's like nice to clear with and don't really mind playing meta, I would try this build out. It's definitely one of the strongest builds they've added to the game, and I feel that it has a lot of potential to go a couple different directions in terms of scaling. You can get things like Sacred Flame in the offhand, which just set an enemy's LE res to their lowest, and you can swap out the amulet, and that becomes a much stronger setup for just single target damage, and there's a lot of options. You can scale non-Trinity, all of that. What I'm trying to get at here is it's a really solid build. Would highly recommend people try, and even if they're a little hesitant. If you really hate playing meta, then maybe the build's not for you. But either way, I want to give some special thanks to all the buddies who helped me theorycraft a couple parts of this build, and I wanted to give thanks to Lazy Exile's guide. They did a really good job at the organizing like a leak start guide for this build, and it helps kind of propel me through theory crafting different setups with the build. But until next time, ciao.